Madam President, these are the remarks I would have given at this morning's Judiciary Committee markup after the perfunctory and dismissive way the chairman treated the minority members of the Judiciary Committee. I walked out in protest. Here are the remarks I would have given at the committee markup. I am in disbelief that we are here today voting on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court. Outrageous does not begin to describe the present circumstances. Yesterday, we heard from Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, who spoke with genuine and raw emotional power about being sexually assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh. Even though it was more than 30 years ago, her memory of the assault was clear and vivid. This kind of recall is typical of sexual assault survivors. She was sincere and authentic. She was 100% credible, and I believe her. By contrast, Brett Kavanaugh came to this committee and refused to give us straight answers. He would not call for an FBI investigation. He repeatedly stated that the other people who were at the gathering where Dr. Ford was attacked had, to quote him, rebutted her testimony. That is not true. His alleged accomplice in the attack, Mark Judge, claimed he didn't remember, a far cry from rebutting her statement. He claimed he didn't remember, refused to testify, and then went into hiding. Patrick Smythe and Leland Kaiser said they simply don't remember. Again, hardly a rebuttal. As Dr. Ford said yesterday, quote, "I don't expect PJ and Leland would remember this evening. It was a very unremarkable party. It was not one of their more notorious parties because nothing remarkable to them happened that evening," end quote. In fact, even though she doesn't remember, Leland Kaiser says she believes Dr. Ford's account. In addition to making misleading statements, which is a pattern with Judge Kavanaugh, he accused the Democratic senators of coordinating a plot to sabotage his nomination. Clearly, he was speaking to an audience of one, President Trump, a nominee for the Supreme Court, so rattled that he would buy into a vast conspiracy theory is astounding and dangerous. Let's not forget his exact words. Judge Kavanaugh said, and I quote, "This whole 2-week effort," he said, "has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit, fueled with apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and the 2016 election, fear that had been unfairly stoked about my judicial record, revenge on behalf of the Clintons, and millions of dollars in money from outside left-wing opposition groups," end quote. With that nakedly political screed, Brett Kavanaugh showed us who he really is, a partisan political operative with an agenda. The very worry that kept him from confirmation to the D.C. Circuit for 3 years. His own words reinforce the concern that I and many of us here have, that he cannot be a fair and impartial judge. Setting aside the unvarnished political view from a potential Supreme Court justice, no less, the crux of the matter before us today is whether Dr. Ford was credible when she said that she is 100% sure that Brett Kavanaugh is the person who sexually assaulted her. And on that issue, Brett Kavanaugh admitted, even without watching her testimony, that Dr. Ford did not play a part and was not part of any imagined partisan plot. So what we're left with is his own recognition that Dr. Ford has no political motive and no reason to lie. I challenge anyone who watched her testimony to claim that she did not tell us the truth. Dr. Ford wasn't the only woman to come forward with an account of sexual misconduct against the nominee. 2 other women have provided credible accounts that deserve real investigation. But whether it is 1 woman or 3 women, my Republican colleagues are letting nothing stop them from plowing through to get Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court as soon as possible. Even before the committee had a chance to hear from Dr. Ford, Chairman Grassley had already scheduled today's vote. By voting to support this nominee, Republican colleagues are sending a message loud and clear: sexual assault survivors should not come forward because we're not going to listen to you. They will not be believed, and their lives will be upended in the process. That's exactly what happened to Dr. Ford. As far as I'm concerned, there was never a serious effort by the committee to get to the truth. Today's vote signals to the men and boys in America that you can demean and assault women, especially if you are in a position of power and influence. There will be no consequences. It won't even prevent you from becoming a Supreme Court justice. Yesterday, accusations flew from the other side of the aisle about deliberate efforts to make up accusations and undermine Judge Kavanaugh's nomination. But Democrats didn't need to manufacture additional reasons to oppose Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation. As I have maintained before, his record demonstrates a pattern of misstating the facts. He wasn't candid yesterday. He wasn't candid in his testimony to the committee when he testified at his 2004 and 2006 confirmation hearings, or when he testified at his confirmation hearing for this nomination in 2018. And I found his candor lacking in the judicial opinions and legal arguments he authored. For example, as my colleagues have talked about in the past, Judge Kavanaugh was not honest with the committee in 2004 and 2006 when asked about matters that he worked on, and his emails from the White House show that he was not honest about his awareness of receiving stolen documents from Manny Miranda. In a case I am familiar with, Rice versus Cayetano, he demonstrated what could only be called a deliberate misstatement of the facts, a deliberate misstatement of the facts that he presented to the United States Supreme Court in this case, Rice v. Cayetano. He had to have known that what he wrote about the politics and culture of Native Hawaiians was not true. He filed an amicus brief in this case. And at his hearing a few weeks ago, Judge Kavanaugh misstated the holding of Rice and refused to correct his misstatement when I gave him a chance to clarify. I would say I'm one of the few people in the Senate who read the Rice decision. I know what the Supreme Court based its decision on, and he totally misstated the Supreme Court's decision. So advocates for our Native communities are stepping up and taking notice. The Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement and the Alaska Federation of Natives issued statements that strongly urge the Senate to reject the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh. They and other groups representing indigenous peoples have come forward to explain how Judge Kavanaugh's views of the rights of indigenous peoples are deeply flawed. These are the kinds of attitudes that he expressed in his amicus brief in Rice v. Cayetano. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent for the following 4 statements that oppose Judge Kavanaugh's nomination or criticize his views of indigenous people to be entered into the record. They are from the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and the Alaska Federation of Natives.
Without objection.
It is deeply troubling to have a Supreme Court nominee for a lifetime position who isn't candid with us about the facts or straight with us about the law. In Garza v. Hargan, he did it again. In that 2017 case, he wrote a dissent in which he misapplied the law and treated the case as if it were about parental consent. It was not. The case, which was about whether a 17-year-old undocumented young woman could be released from immigration custody to have an abortion, did not involve the question of parental consent. But he sat there at his nomination hearing when I asked him about it, and he said that was a case involving parental consent. Total misstatement of the issue in the case. So in that case, this young woman had already received a proper judicial bypass from a Texas judge that allowed her to make her own decisions. So that was had nothing to do with having to require parental consent. She had already overcome that. But that wasn't good enough for Judge Kavanaugh. He inserted his own views about legal issues not even present in the case. This is just one example of his outcome-driven approach to important cases before him. At the hearing, I also asked him about the pattern that was revealed in his numerous dissents. In several of those cases, his own colleagues called him out for misrepresenting the facts and the law. Just last year in United States v. Anthem, the majority said that Judge Kavanaugh, quote, applies the law as he wishes it to be, as he wishes it were, not as it currently is, end quote. And in a 2008 case, Agri-Processor v. NLRB, the majority wrote, quote, the dissent, meaning Judge Kavanaugh's dissent, creates its own rule. Instead of following Supreme Court rules, they said Judge Kavanaugh's dissent abandons the text of the applicable laws altogether. It's pretty telling when your own colleagues on the court feel so strongly about your dissent that they will actually call him out on it. When this nomination first came to the Senate, I was skeptical. I said that if the president's nominee to the Supreme Court is anything like the nominees he's been sending to the lower federal courts, I expect we will see a nominee handpicked by the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation, intent on carrying out their right-wing ideology supported by the president. It turned out to be much worse than I imagined. Not only was the nominee someone who fit that description, it became clear that he was someone who lacked candor, credibility, and character. This has been displayed at every turn. After hearing from Dr. Ford and Brett Kavanaugh, and yesterday, the editors of America Magazine, a well-respected Jesuit weekly, withdrew. They had originally endorsed Judge Kavanaugh. This group withdrew its endorsement of Judge Kavanaugh. They said, quote, while we previously endorsed the nomination of Judge Kavanaugh on the basis of his legal credentials and his reputation as a committed textualist, it is now clear that the nomination should be withdrawn. If Senate Republicans proceed with this nomination, they will be prioritizing policy aims over a woman's report of an assault, end quote. I ask unanimous consent, Madam President, that a copy of this article be entered into the record.
Without objection.
In addition, Robert Carlson, president of the American Bar Association, the ABA, issued a letter urging the Judiciary Committee and the Senate to not vote on Judge Kavanaugh's nomination until there is an FBI investigation in Dr. Ford's account of sexual assault. The ABA explained that, quote, deciding to proceed without conducting additional investigation would not only have a lasting impact on the Senate's reputation, but it will also negatively affect the great trust necessary for the American people to have in the Supreme Court. End quote. I agree. Brett Kavanaugh does not have the credibility, candor, character, or I would say, as we saw yesterday, the temperament to be on the Supreme Court. His presence on the court under this kind of cloud will weaken the court. I cannot support this nomination. Madam President, I'd like to end the remarks that I would have given at the markup, but I'm giving those remarks on the floor now. I would like to say that my colleague, Senator Jeff Flake, has said that he would not be able to vote on the confirmation of Judge Kavanaugh without an FBI investigation into the current allegations. I support that. I have no idea if the Republican leadership is going to allow a timeout for that kind of investigation to occur, an investigation that I and others, the Democratic members of the Judiciary Committee, have been calling for what seems like months. And of course, I would want an FBI investigation to be thorough. I do not want some kind of a peripheral investigation to give cover to senators who are wavering. I would want an investigation by the FBI to be thorough, to be real, to provide us with the kind of information that we need to make a determination as to the credibility, candor, character of Judge Kavanaugh. I yield the floor.